In a galaxy full of ancient civilizations, countless species, and endless technologies, humanity was once just a curiosity. At least that's what everyone thought. The Galactic Council had their eyes set on the truly remarkable races, the apex predators, the godlike beings, the civilizations that had conquered both space and time. Humans, however, were seen as nothing more than an afterthought. They might survive a little while, the experts said, but they'll never truly be a threat. How wrong they were. When humanity was first discovered by the Galactic Council, no one paid much attention. Sure, humans were resilient, able to tolerate extreme temperatures and adapt to nearly any environment, but that was nothing special. They weren't the fastest, the strongest, or the most intelligent species in the universe. In fact, their biggest claim to fame was how they had managed to become a sentient species at all, given that they were just another prey animal in the grand scheme of things. But then, something changed. A spark, a moment, a single event that would ignite a war unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. And that's where this story begins. The Galactic Council thought humanity would crumble, that they would fold under the weight of their own imperfections. But instead, they came together in a way no one could have predicted. Years of hatred, distrust, and division among the human nations vanished in an instant, and a united front was born. The human race, driven by an unrelenting thirst for survival and justice, decided it was time to take back what was theirs. The Trixie, once thought to be unstoppable, would learn the hard way that humans were not to be underestimated. It didn't matter that the Trixie had already conquered over 70% of human territory. It didn't matter that the entire galaxy had turned its back on them. The humans were coming, and they weren't going to stop until they had what they wanted. But this wasn't just a battle for survival. This was a battle for honor, a battle for blood. And as the conflict dragged on, humanity began to change. No longer were they the fragile, flawed species that the Council had dismissed. The humans had become something else entirely, something far more dangerous. And the Trixie, they had no idea what was coming for them. Now, after years of brutal warfare, with both sides suffering unimaginable losses, the galaxy is on the edge of a new reality. The war that started as a simple struggle for survival has turned into something much darker, something far more personal. The humans are not just fighting to exist anymore. They are fighting for revenge. They are fighting to erase the Trixie from history, and they have no intention of stopping until they do. But as the dust begins to settle and the wreckage of billions of lives piles up, a shocking twist awaits. The Galactic Council, desperate to stop the bloodshed, calls for peace talks. On the surface, it looks like a moment of hope, an opportunity for the humans to negotiate a ceasefire and return to a semblance of peace. But as the talks unfold, it becomes clear that the humans are not interested in peace at all. In fact, they have something far more terrifying in mind. At the peace table, the human delegation, led by a leader whose calm demeanor hides a storm of rage, makes a stunning declaration that shakes the very foundations of the galaxy. In a calculated move, they reveal that they have already made their decision. Peace? That's not what they want. No, the humans want something much more. They want justice, and they're willing to destroy anyone who stands in their way. As the human leader smiles, the council members watch in stunned silence. The Trixie ambassador can hardly believe what's happening. The humans, who were once dismissed as weak, are now calling the shots. And when the human armada is revealed, poised around the Trixie homeworld, the true horror of the situation becomes clear. The Trixie, once the invaders, are now the ones in peril. The humans are no longer fighting to survive. They are fighting to annihilate their enemies, to make sure that no one ever dares to underestimate them again. But the real question remains: how far are the humans willing to go? And who will stand with them as they cross the line between vengeance and madness? The Galactic Council has already turned on itself, with factions defecting and sides being chosen. No one knows who will come out on top in this galactic showdown. But one thing is certain: nothing will ever be the same again. So, what happens next? Will humanity rise to the challenge and become the ultimate power in the galaxy? Or will they fall into the very darkness they've unleashed? Stay tuned, because the story of the humans' unexpected rise has only just begun. And trust me, you won't want to miss what's coming next. This is just the beginning, and the galaxy is about to find out why humans are truly weird. The human delegation's decision at the peace talks was just the beginning of a storm that would sweep through the galaxy. The moment the peace talks fell apart, it became clear humanity wasn't here to negotiate. They weren't here to heal old wounds. They had already made their choice. The human leader's calm smile wasn't one of diplomacy. It was a mask for the fury they had been holding inside for far too long. For centuries, humans had been underestimated, belittled, and dismissed as nothing more than a nuisance by the galactic powers. The Council, the Trixie, and countless others had treated humanity as if their survival was just a matter of time. But now, humanity had tasted blood, and they were hungry for more. But what led to this? How did humans, once so fractured, come together as one unstoppable force? The answer wasn't simple. Humanity had always been divided. Nations fought nations. Ideologies clashed with one another, and old wounds seemed impossible to heal. But the invasion of the Trixie had brought something out in humans no one could have predicted: unity. The Trixie, with their ruthless and calculated military might, had swept through human territories like a storm, crushing everything in their path. They weren't just invading, they were dismantling everything that humans had built, erasing cultures, and tearing apart families. And the galaxy watched, indifferent. At first, it seemed like humanity had no chance. No one expected them to put up a fight. Even the humans themselves were uncertain, with some wondering if they'd ever recover from the devastation. But then, something shifted. The leaders of the fractured human nations, those who had been enemies for generations, began to set aside their differences. The loss of so many lives, so many innocents, forced them to confront a terrifying truth. If they didn't unite, they would be wiped out. It was a bitter pill to swallow, but the choice was clear. In the wake of that realization, something incredible happened. Old alliances were forged. Bitter enemies became allies. And a sense of solidarity spread across the human race. People who had once been locked in bitter conflict now fought side by side, driven by a single cause: survival. But it wasn't just survival they were after. They wanted more. They wanted revenge. They wanted to make sure the Trixie and everyone who had turned their backs on them would know that humanity would never be an easy target again. And so, the tide turned. The human resistance, bolstered by the unified will of the people, began to take back what was theirs, planet by planet. At first, it was slow. The Trixie had the advantage: advanced technology, overwhelming numbers, and a ruthless approach that made them nearly unstoppable. But humans were resourceful. They adapted. They learned. And the Trixie had no idea what was coming. The conflict escalated. What started as a desperate attempt at survival morphed into a war for vengeance. The human race wasn't just trying to hold on anymore. They were pushing forward with a fury that made even the most seasoned warriors in the galaxy hesitate. But with every victory, the stakes grew higher. The human resolve was unbreakable, but the toll was immense. Entire cities were reduced to rubble. Families were torn apart. The Trixie retaliated with a vengeance, not caring for the lives they destroyed. As the war stretched on, humanity's numbers began to dwindle. For every Trixie soldier killed, the humans lost their own. It was a brutal, unforgiving cycle, and yet the humans kept going. They had no choice. As the battle for the Trixie homeworld loomed, the human forces were stretched, thin. They were battered, broken, but they had one thing the Trixie didn't: sheer willpower. They were fighting not just for their homes, but for their place in the galaxy. They were fighting for a future where they wouldn't be the underdogs anymore, where they wouldn't be seen as a race to be disregarded. Every human who died in this war had a name. Every life lost was a person, a family, a memory, and they would not let those sacrifices be in vain. In the midst of all this, the human leader, the one who had initially spoken with cold, calculating clarity at the peace talks, became the embodiment of everything humanity had become. A fierce, determined leader, his every move was watched by the galaxy with bated breath. Was he a hero? Or had the weight of the war turned him into something darker? To his people, he was a symbol of hope, the one who had united them when all seemed lost. To the Trixie and the Council, he was a threat, a dangerous, unpredictable force. But even with all his power and influence, the leader was not invincible. The constant pressure of war had begun to take its toll. He couldn't sleep. The weight of every decision, every life lost, bore down on him. Sometimes, in the dead of night, he would walk alone, haunted by the faces of the fallen, wondering if the war would ever truly end, or if humanity was simply doomed to repeat the cycle of violence that had defined so much of its history. And then came the moment, the tipping point. The human fleet, with its newly acquired firepower and strategic brilliance, had surrounded the Trixie homeworld. The Trixie, with their backs to the wall, prepared for one final stand. But what the Trixie didn't know was that humanity had already decided. The negotiations were over. The ceasefire, the talks. It was all a smokescreen. The human leader had already made his choice. The message sent to the Council was clear. Peace was not on the table. The war would end, but not on the Trixie's terms. The human armada was already in motion. As the fleet closed in on the Trixie homeworld, the galaxy held its breath. Would humanity take the final step and completely annihilate the Trixie, or would they stop short, perhaps at the last moment, pulled back by the remnants of their humanity? No one knew, but one thing was certain. Whatever happened next would reshape the galaxy forever. The conflict that had started with desperation and vengeance was now headed toward an unpredictable and terrifying climax. And just as the first shots rang out, the Trixie, shocked, terrified, and scrambling to mount a defense, could only wonder, had they pushed humanity too far? Had they created something far more dangerous than they ever anticipated? The answer, of course, was already clear. They had. But what would it cost humanity to win? Would victory mean their salvation, or would it be their doom? Only time would tell. The human armada, a vast, terrifying force of ships and soldiers, loomed over the Trixie homeworld, its engines humming with a terrifying promise. Every soldier, every leader, every strategist knew what was at stake. This was no longer a war for survival, no longer a war for territory. It was personal. Humanity had made its choice. The Trixie, and anyone who stood with them, would pay the price for what they had done. The Trixie, however, were not prepared for the sheer ferocity with which humanity fought. For years, they had underestimated humans, seeing them as little more than pawns in a game of galactic politics. They had no idea that every defeat, every injustice, was slowly feeding a storm of anger and resolve within the human race. The galaxy had misjudged them, but now, as the human forces descended on the Trixie stronghold, that mistake was becoming painfully clear. The Trixie scrambled to defend themselves, but it was too late. The human leader, calm as ever, had ensured that this final strike was meticulously planned. The human armada surged forward, unleashing wave after wave of devastating firepower. The Trixie forces, once mighty and unchallenged, were overwhelmed. Their fleets crumbled, their defenses shattered. For the first time in the history of the galaxy, a species that had once been so sure of its superiority was being brought to its knees by those they had once deemed insignificant. But it wasn't just the Trixie who were paying the price. Humanity had suffered too. So many lives lost, so many cities destroyed. Even with their victories, the scars of the war were everywhere, and the human leader, watching the devastation unfold, felt the weight of every sacrifice. Yet, there was no turning back now. The human resolve was unbreakable. There would be no peace until the Trixie had been eradicated, and even then, the cost of their actions would remain. As the final assault on the Trixie homeworld unfolded, something unexpected happened. A Trixie ship, seemingly crippled and barely operational, broke through the line of human forces and sent a transmission to the human leader. The voice that came through was shaky but resolute. It was the Trixie commander, the one who had been responsible for the initial invasion of human territory. His voice cracked as he begged for mercy. We never understood," the commander said, his tone filled with regret. "We thought we could crush you, like all the others. We were wrong. Please, show mercy." The human leader, standing at the center of the command ship, stared at the transmission, the weight of his decision hanging in the balance. For a moment, time seemed to stand still. The war, the loss, the rage, everything hung in the air. And then, with a heavy heart, the human leader made his choice. He turned to his crew and issued one simple command: "Stand down." The order was unexpected, and it was met with stunned silence. After all that had happened, after the pain and the suffering, after the countless lives lost, the human leader was choosing mercy. It was an act that no one could have predicted, but it was exactly what humanity needed. The commander's ship was spared, and through the chaos of the war, a tentative ceasefire began. It wasn't the victory that many had hoped for, but it was a resolution.